The Vermont State Board of Nursing celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2011, so it's a fitting time to reflect on the changes the board has seen in its composition, roles, and practice. Over the years, many things have changed. However, the one constant is their commitment to protecting the public. The Board of Nursing came into being because of concern over the quality of care that nurses and physicians administered to patients. There was a need to ensure that quality of care, so in 1911, the board was established by the Vermont legislature and consisted of 2 doctors and 1 registered nurse. Today, the board is composed of 5 registered nurses, 2 advanced practice registered nurses, 2 licensed practical nurses, and 1 licensed nursing assistant. There are also 2 public members. The Board of Nursing is part of the Office of Professional Regulation in the Secretary of State's office.
There are so many things changing, and we have the job of protecting the public and thinking about how can the public be safe and nurses practice to the fullest extent of their knowledge and ability.
They approach it with the thought that there are 600,000 Vermonters looking over their shoulder, relying on them to do the right thing to protect the public.
The board, by statute, is responsible to safeguard the life and health of the people of Vermont. The board has a number of powers and duties, including prescribing standards for education programs, registering and licensing of individuals to practice nursing, investigating complaints of unprofessional practice and taking action where appropriate, and regulating the practice of nursing and publishing position statements. In 1911, there were 9 nurses who took the written exam, which was developed and administered by the Board of Nursing. In 1946, Vermont started using the National Test Pool questions. This written examination included 5 clinical areas and was administered over a 2-day period. Today, nursing students take the Registered Nurses exam via a 4-hour computer-adapted test developed by the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. Vermont was one of the first states to license nursing assistants. Today, there are over 16,000 registered nurses, 2,300 licensed practical nurses, 4,700 licensed nursing assistants, and 500 advanced practice registered nurses. Advanced practice registered nurses have long practiced with prescriptive authority and collaborative practice with physicians. In 1990, the title APRN was incorporated into the Nurse Practice Act. Recent changes to the statutes and rules allow APRNs to practice independently after completing a transition to practice period. The collaborative practice may now be with another APRN or physician.
It's a pretty complicated system to be able to regulate who is able to get a license and process all of those applications. We get thousands of applications every year, and then every 2 years we renew over 15,000 licensees who are already license holders in the state of Vermont.
In 1929, the legislature required the board to approve all schools of nursing annually based on standards established by the board. Nursing education was primarily offered in 3-year hospital diploma programs based in community hospitals, many of which had affiliations with larger hospitals in urban areas. Today, there are no diploma programs in Vermont. Instead, nursing education is offered at colleges and universities for associate, baccalaureate, and graduate degrees, and the board regularly surveys each nursing program. Nursing assistant education programs are offered at many sites throughout the state.
We set educational standards for them, and that's a big protection for the public. The board has, I think, always been able to look forward and always with the protection of people in mind.
Nursing is an evolving profession, and rules and regulations change to reflect the evolving roles and responsibilities of nurses, consistent with the board's mandate to protect the public. The board issues position statements to guide nurses in their practice. For example, the delegation of care position statement was in response to the increased use of unlicensed personnel in clinical settings and schools.
Every year there are changes to the scopes of practice for many professions. And nursing, I think, is evolving with nurses taking on a greater and greater role in healthcare delivery. And so our standards have to keep up with those changes. So every year we go to the legislature and propose new laws, new statutes.
Vermont has mandatory reporting laws which require employers to notify the Board of Nursing of any nurse or nursing assistant who has been terminated. All complaints of unprofessional conduct are reported to the board and may be made by members of the public. The Board of Nursing website hosts directions and forms on how to submit a complaint.
Regulation is important to the public so that they have some place to turn when they're harmed by a licensed professional in this state. So if someone feels like they've been harmed by a licensed nurse, they can come to the nursing board and the board will investigate and sometimes prosecute those cases. And after a hearing in front of the board, they may take a disciplinary action, which could be anything from a warning to conditions on the license and restrictions on practice to even revocation of a license if a nurse is so dangerous as to not be able to practice safely.
I think it's also important for the integrity of the entire regulatory process that not only do we do things properly and legally, but we be perceived by the public as doing it legally and properly. So it's really important for us to bend over backwards and set an example of law-abiding conduct by our boards, by the office, and it's important to us to set an example of how to deal with people fairly.
I think that it's very important for the public and for professionals to be aware that the Board of Nursing has standards and tries to apply them consistently so that all the processes are fair and show no favoritism. On the other hand, it's important for people to be aware that every situation is also looked at on a case-by-case basis because there are so many unique situations that you just can't plug in a rule and say, well, this is how it always is.
In 2004, the Board of Nursing initiated the Alternative Program for eligible nurses and nursing assistants who are in recovery from substance use disorders. The board believes that addiction is an illness and should be treated as such. Provided they fully comply with the program requirements, participants may continue to practice professionally.
It's grown over the years. That's another area where the board has factored in emerging information that's been gathered nationwide based on experience because many alternative programs began about the same time or a little before, and so it is an emerging field, but the idea is that there's a non-public way rather than a disciplinary way for nurses with substance use disorders to get the support they need while at the same time protecting the public.
Protecting the public, that's their first priority. But also in the same process, if they can guide a nurse to get well from drug abuse or guide a nurse by a stipulation for practice issues, it's ultimately going to protect the public and help the public.
This board is there for the people of the state.
The Vermont State Board of Nursing has changed considerably from its beginning 100 years ago. But one thing has not changed, and that is the board's commitment to safeguard the health and safety of the people of Vermont. To accomplish its mission of public protection, the Board of Nursing will continually evolve and adapt to changes in education, practice, and discipline that impact the delivery of nursing care to the people of Vermont.